The great state of Texas has found a way to get rid of its progressives. You know, a lot of Democrats got really excited in 2020. They thought that Texas was going to swing to the left and elect Joe Biden. In fact, the Biden team poured money into Texas. Texas became for the Democrats what California used to be for the Republicans, a sinkhole for money where you wouldn't actually win, but you were convinced you could. Remember, in 2000, George W. Bush and Karl Rove redirected resources to California out of Florida, thinking they had a shot in California. They didn't. Had they poured the money into Florida, we might not have had the debacle we had, but that's all hindsight. In Texas, in 2018, Beto O'Rourke came close to beating Ted Cruz, and Democrats picked up a lot of seats that they weren't expecting. It was a Democratic wave. They assumed in 2020 they would be able to do it again. And in fact, in Texas, there were 10 targets for the Democrats to take in the House of Representatives. They lost exactly zero. Or I'm sorry, they won exactly zero. They lost every one of them. 10 targets in Texas, and they lost all of them. They were convinced. They poured resources in. Arguably, the Democrats would have done better nationwide, except they were convinced beyond all reason that they were going to win in Texas, much like they were also convinced they were going to win in South Carolina against Lindsey Graham, and they poured money into that race. And in Kentucky, they poured money in against Mitch McConnell. They really thought they were going to beat Mitch McConnell with, what's her name, Amy McGrath or whoever. At least the Democrat from South Carolina went on to become the chairman of the Democratic National Committee. He won something, even if he didn't win South Carolina. Democrats are convinced they could win Texas, and they didn't, and their hopes were crushed. And now Texas has enacted a pro-life law that the Supreme Court and the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals have been unwilling to put on hold only because the abortion clinics keep suing the wrong people. But in the process, it has largely shut down abortion in Texas. Children are being saved, and now progressives are beginning to flee the state. This is a model. Those of you here in Georgia where I am, the state, everybody's worried the state is trending to the Democrats. You may want to do this law and watch all the progressives flee Georgia. Do it quickly, and so they're gone by the 2022 election. Salesforce made one of the biggest moves. This is from Gizmodo. Made one of the biggest moves in the tech industry in light of highly restrictive Texas abortion law on Friday in a message to employees on Slack. The company said it would help them and their immediate families relocate if they were worried about access to reproductive health care in their state. Although the message, which was obtained by CNBC, appeared not to single out Texas, Salesforce CEO Mark Benioff later went on Twitter to explicitly say the company would help any employees move from the state. Nonetheless, CNBC reported that Salesforce did not take a stance on the law in its Slack message, emphasizing that it respected different views, but also stood in solidarity with women. These are incredibly personal issues that directly impact many of you, especially women. Salesforce said, what? No, you bigots, not just women, people, because people have babies, not women. The company did not take a stance on the law. We recognize and respect that we all have deeply held and different perspectives. As a company, we stand with all of our women at Salesforce and everywhere. Salesforce has offices in Dallas. A CNBC analysis of LinkedIn profiles found about 2,000 people work for the company in Dallas. Tech companies have come under scrutiny in recent weeks for their silence on the Texas abortion law. Notice how the media itself is demanding that companies take positions for left-wing policy. They never did this when the companies they thought might take conservative positions, but now they're perfectly willing to try to push them in a progressive direction. Uber and Lyft announced they would cover all legal fees for drivers sued for taking women to get abortions. Shar Dubey, the CEO of Match Group, which owns Tinder and Hinge, said she would personally create a fund that would help employees in Texas obtain abortions elsewhere. Yeah. Okay. Now, the Washington Post has a story as well. That's from Gizmodo. This is from the Washington Post. On September 3rd, just 2 days after Texas banned abortions, Vivek Bhaskaran, the chief executive of an Austin-based online survey software company, quickly assembled the handful of female employees that are based in the city. In the virtual town hall that lasted about 15 minutes, he told the women that regardless of insurance, the company would cover out-of-state abortion services. I'm not a politician. I can't change everything, but I'm still responsible for my employees in Texas, and I have a moral responsibility to them, said the CEO of Question Pro. For the last several years, Texas has been selling itself as a tech haven, attracting startups and tech companies such as Oracle, Hewlett-Packard, even Elon Musk. Tesla's billionaire co-founder and CEO moved to the state. Big tech companies like Facebook, Amazon, and Apple have all grown their presence in the state, opening warehouses, data centers, production facilities. But Texas's recent swerve to the right on abortion, voting restrictions, and a ban on COVID vaccine mandates has many workers and industry leaders worried about retaining workers. Y'all, this is a brilliant strategy in the future. See, what's happening here, and you got to follow along with this. What Texas did, what Georgia did, what a number of other states did, Florida was not in this group, by the way. What a lot of these states did is they decided, instead of building up businesses that were domestic, businesses that were natural, businesses that were based already in their states, they would lure out-of-state companies into their state. Texas, in particular, focused on tech companies, trying to bring tech companies to Texas. So in Texas, under Greg Abbott's leadership, a lot of incentives were provided for major tech companies to come to the state. And what did these people do? The theory was they would hire Texans to fill the jobs. That's not really what happened. What happened is they brought a lot of people from out of state into the state. In so doing, what happened? They began to change the state. Now, the data actually shows that native Texans are far more liberal than those who came into the state. But in the tech company sphere, the people imported by the tech companies were already liberal. The result is that they have changed the culture of Texas in urban areas where these people live. Texas has now passed a program or a law that does not ban abortion by the state. What it does is it allows individuals a right to sue anyone they find has collaborated in abortion. This is not a new approach to things. Progressives actually pioneered this in environmental regulation in California in the 70s and 80s. I mean, the media talks about it as if it's something new that's never been done before. That's not really true. In the 1970s and 80s, California pioneered for consumer protections in the environment, an individual right to sue, a private right to sue to enforce regulation. And it worked for consumer laws and it worked for environmental laws. During the Obama administration, the federal government pioneered regulations for the first time allowing a private right of citizens to sue over environmental regulations. So, for example, coal ash. Power companies who have used coal burning plants have to store their ash somewhere. They typically store them in lined lakes and ponds. Sometimes they're not lined, and the residue can seep into the groundwater. And the federal government under Obama's EPA allowed individuals the right to sue over the storage of coal ash. Normally, the EPA itself would sue, but the EPA, short-staffed, decided to allow private citizens to do it. Well, the right learned a lesson from this. Why don't we do the same thing with abortion? We will pass laws that allow individuals the private right to sue to stop abortion. It's not something new. It's just never been applied to abortion. It's not something the right came up with. It's actually something the progressives came up with in California in the 70s and 80s. Now, I realize you're not getting that in the media coverage, but it's the truth. You can look it up. But the fallout of this has been hilarious. Now you've got massive shifts in tech jobs. Texas has seen a 199% increase in tech job openings. Florida, 206%. North Carolina, 179%. Georgia, 152%. California, 92%. Now, a lot of people are saying that the reason for the job openings is because Texas is conservative and the Republicans won. A lot of it is they actually just need people, but people's political perceptions are being drawn into this. However, that being said, it's not a bad idea for conservative states to consider some legislation that turns off progressives. I mean, there was, if you remember this, years ago, there was an effort of conservatives to essentially adopt New Hampshire and have people move to New Hampshire and set up shop in New Hampshire to keep New Hampshire from going left. Progressives have been consciously and subconsciously doing this for some time. Major corporations have been moving people around the country. Amazon is notorious for this. They move into an area, they promise all sorts of jobs creation, and then Amazon brings in all their hipster left-wing employees from Washington State and turns the politics of the state. Tennessee is in danger of this because of Amazon. Amazon set up shop in Nashville. They're changing the character of the surroundings of Nashville, dragging them to the left. Franklin, Tennessee has been pretty Republican. It's trending to the left because of these major tech companies coming in, not hiring existing people there, but bringing in their employees who are progressives. And the tech companies view this as missional. The tech companies view this as a way to shift the politics of states to their advantage. Nobody's paying attention to it. I think you got to pay attention to it. Really need to pay attention to it. But now we see from Texas, there's a way to combat it. Pass conservative laws. Now, I need to speak real quick, and my apologies here. We're growing a national show, I realize, but I am in Georgia. And I want to speak to my Georgia audience, but you, wherever you are, can take lessons from this if you're in a Republican state. Since 2002 in Georgia, the Republican governors have been trying to lure major Fortune 500 companies to Georgia. Porsche, Mercedes-Benz, a bunch of companies they've tried to lure to the state. They tried to lure Amazon to the state and thankfully lost out. What happened with these companies is they came in and they brought their employees with them. They didn't hire Georgians for their major roles. They brought in their executives from other states who are mostly progressive. It coincides with the state becoming bluer and bluer, becoming more competitive for Democrats. When Brian Kemp became governor of Georgia, he decided to stop doing that and instead focus on Georgia businesses that want to get bigger and helping pre-existing companies. It seemed like a no-brainer all along. Why are you trying to bring a company in from New Jersey when you got a competitor here in Georgia that you can make big? And that's what Kemp's done, is he's focused on the state's existing industry and tried to make them competitive and big, as opposed to using your tax dollars to draw in bigger companies. The Georgia legislature has been horrible when it comes to real school choice and school reform, issues that are popular with black moms and that draw people to the Republican Party, issues that the Republicans in Florida used to make the state a Republican state as opposed to a swing state. I think they need to start thinking legislatively, what are we going to pass in the state legislature to disincentivize progressives from moving here and incentivize black and Hispanic parents starting to vote Republican. And I think wherever you are, now let's step out of my state, Georgia, to your state. If you got a Republican legislature and a Republican governor, you need to be thinking about the same things. What laws do we pass to signal we're a conservative state so that progressives don't think they can come here, and if they do come here, they're going to be miserable because they can't kill their kids or do God knows what? But also, what are we going to do as a state to incentivize private education and homeschooling, issues that draw parents into the Republican Party? The Republican Party is not a party that is dying. It's only dying in the eyes of the media. But it is dying in ideas. Doesn't have a lot of good ideas these days. I don't know what it means to be a Republican. But if you support homeschools and school choice and the pro-life movement, that segments you from the Democrats and makes you anathema to progressives. And a lot of progressives aren't going to want to deal with your state. And a lot of parents are going to want to be with you because they support sending their kids to private schools to get good education. So food for thought for you Republicans. Maybe there's a lot we can learn from Texas.